We're good to go. There's Mr. Mike. Hey, Mike. There we go. And I'm back. All right, we're going to continue our study on Isaiah. Resources I typically use, blueletterbible.org, BibleGateway.com. Study Light, it's got a bunch of tools, including Kaufman's commentary, Barnes' note. I use the Gospel Broadcast Network. It's got an outline commentary by Bob Winton. This week, we got a little tricky on some of that stuff. I usually use the ESV. I use Chuck already had some of the slides already pre-made, so I've got a hit there in New American Standard, 1995. As we get into Isaiah 56, I looked at 3 different commentaries, and they all went 3 different directions. So I had to reason that out for myself and pick what I thought was the best, and pick the highlights out of the other 2 of what they were worth. Anyways, that's where I'm at. So, rewards for continued faith to God. And I think that's a good title for what the lesson really is as you get the whole thing. So Isaiah 56, verses 1 through 2. Thus says the Lord, preserve justice and do righteousness, for my salvation is about to come, and my righteousness is to be revealed. How blessed is the man who does this, and the son of man who takes hold of it, who keeps from profaning the Sabbath and keeps his hand from doing any evil. Who is Isaiah prophesying to? Who is Isaiah talking to? So God speaks through Isaiah. Who is he talking to? He's talking to the Israelites. He's talking to the Jews. He's talking to God's people at that time is who he's talking to. What kind of clues do we see? Thanks for coming back, Chuck. What kind of clues do we see that he's talking to the Jews, those people under the law? What kind of clues do we see that that's who he's talking to? The Sabbath is one of those words that, yeah, they would understand that, and they would typically keep that. They weren't doing a great job of it at this time, but anyways. Yeah, anything else? Yeah, it talks about deliverance. There's salvation and righteousness, and that actually points towards the church, and that's part of the prophecy too. So that's really, I said earlier, I looked at 3 different commentaries, and they went 3 different points in 3 different places. So I pick what's best, and I think I'm okay with that. But anyways, so yeah, so Isaiah is talking to God's people. And you can see that with things like talking about salvation. You can see that talking about the Sabbath, keeping them from doing evil. But he's talking to the Jews. He's talking to the Israelites, the people of Judah. That's who he's talking to. When do you think he made this prophecy? Maybe clues on this kind of thing too, or what we've been looking at before. Well, actually, I'll show you some more clues. He's making this prophecy, and that's where some of the commentaries differ. I'm going to say he made this prophecy at the end of the reign of Manasseh before captivity. Before Manasseh? Okay. Oh, okay. Well.
Manasseh or the end of Hezekiah?
Okay.
It's hard to say.
Just before captivity, how about that? Wow.
Captivity was a couple kings after Manasseh.
Wow. Does it get to after Manasseh?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Jehoiakim and a couple of them that were J's.
Okay.
So.
All right. That's where it's like strongest. I'm weak in that part of it.
You may have already gone to that business. And the Son of Man who takes hold of it, who keeps from profaning the Sabbath, and keeps his hand from doing evil. I thought that was Christ.
I would say that's Christ.
It says the Son of Man who does this, it wasn't talking to the Jews, it was talking about Christ. Praised to me.
My take on it, and I think you're right on that too, God's talking to the Jews pre-exile, but he's talking to them about the promise that is to, there'll be some things that talk about going into exile, and when there's some of it talks about the church, the coming of the Son afterwards. I don't think it's purely messianic. But I don't know. We'll go with that. But what you see there, I'm going to say it is definitely, this says Christ is coming, is what that says. And, I'll go with that. I'm completely good with that. Things that lead me to think that he's doing it pre-exile, and Chuck holds the pre-exile point of view too, down in verses 10 through 12. His watchmen are blind, all of them know nothing, all of them are mute dogs, unable to bark, dreamers lying down who love to slumber. Dogs are greedy and they're not satisfied, and they're like shepherds who have no understanding. They have all turned on their own way, each one in the unjust gain to the last one. Come, they say, let us get wine and let us drink heavily of strong drink, and tomorrow will be okay, only more so. This was the state that Judah was in pre-exile. You wouldn't see this state with leadership if they're in exile, because their leaders are not in command. We saw some of this kind of references too early on in Isaiah, didn't we? About drunk dogs laying in the street.
We had that one or not. When I was put this together with the previous verse, I was looking at that here to say, when Christ was coming, the watchmen were blind, the shepherds were taking advantage of all the people. You know, when Christ went into the temple and turned tables over because they turned it into a den of thieves.
Yes.
The Pharisees and Sadducees really were looking for the Messiah. They wanted to keep their power. So
It implies
again,
that
it's prophecy. You can interpret it a lot of different ways.
you can, and it might be like we've talked before. Sometimes short and long, but sometimes even we've looked at types and types in reality. It might be a type pre-exile, but then when you get up closer to Christ, this is where it all pulls in. So
It wasn't the people who were all evil. It was the leadership.
It was
the
leadership.
shepherds.
Yeah, leading people the wrong way or not leading for their own good is what you're looking at. Dogs are the leaders of people. That's just what they are. And dogs are usually used, you see them for Gentiles. The Gentiles are usually considered dogs, but the leaders of the Jewish people live in Gentile lives. Would you feel that's a rational description of it? They're not leading holy, righteous lives. They're more like the Gentiles. They're after themselves, all out for themselves. Do you agree with that or not?
You kind of see that description of the two parts. The shepherds have no understanding. Well, that would be probably the priests and scribes. And then you had the Pharisees and Sadducees would be the dogs. They're eating the people up.
Good. Pharisees and Sadducees are definitely eating people up. So, yeah.
What the philosophy was on the leadership pre-exile. You've had four groups that emerged in Christ's time. Mm-hmm. The Essenes, I usually say that wrong, she corrects me. And then you had the Zealots, and then you had the Pharisees, and you had the Sadducees. So you had those four groups that kind of evolved. The pre-exile, I don't know.
Yeah, the four groups post-exile, but even pre-exile, you got a king, you've got, I don't know. I would say it wasn't as disjoint. But
Pre-exile, everybody was going after pagan gods, so
No, that's
you
true,
wouldn't
too.
have had that structure.
not enough people interested in having to kind of start their own thing. Yeah, the pagan gods and stuff, that we've seen that time and time through here. Chapter 57's got more stuff on the idolatrous rites that are practiced at this time, the persecution of true followers, seeking foreign alliances. A lot of that kind of stuff we know happens just before exile, and chapter 57's got a lot of that kind of stuff into it. Some of the commentators take 56 and 57 as one big chunk, and they combine them. It's hard to tell. It's hard to tell where the real divisions are. But if you do it that way, that helps set it as at least pre-exile. Some people believe this is during exile, and he's forecasting, like he talked about the salvation, the righteousness. It's the prophecy that they're going to come out, and then good things will happen. Some of this is just purely messianic, and actually they point towards the church time. And I don't think this thing is in church time. It's not. I don't think that's who he's talking to. But say, make that of it what you want. So, the last few verses of the Old Testament, Malachi 4 says, "Remember the law of Moses, my servant, even the statutes and ordinances, which is what I commanded him in Horeb, for all Israel." So at the end of the Old Testament, he has the same kind of encouragement as what he has here at the beginning of 56. Preserve justice, do righteousness, don't profane the Sabbath, keep your hand from doing evil. God puts the same kind of words at both places, I guess, as they go pre-exile, and even as they go dark with prophecies before the church comes, the last few words. They're very similar. Stick with me. I think that's really what it says, is stick with me. No?
In verse 1, preserve justice and do righteousness, for my salvation is about to come and my righteousness revealed.
Right. That's got to be Christ.
That's messianic.
That's got to be messianic.
And then the second one, where the Son of Man takes hold of it, and he lived a perfect life. It's what's saying. He fulfilled every little piece of the law. He kept everything perfectly.
So you're looking at it.
That's what I'm looking at. That's what I'm looking at. When I read it, that's the conclusion I came to.
All right. You're looking at Christ fulfilling that preserved justice and doing righteousness, and I'm looking at it as an admonition for the people to be faithful. Because you got that remnant that has to come out of exile.
One way is to say physical salvation from Babylonian captivity. One way is to say spiritual salvation from our own sin.
That spiritual salvation still has to come from those who keep the faith, in some form or fashion. Anybody else got anything to say?
Yes, I'm looking at it as it's twofold. The temple was about to be rebuilt, and was talking about those who are going to enter into that temple, right? And at the same time, it's talking about the spiritual.
Spiritual,
temple to come.
yeah, the spiritual temple to come.
Don't actually go into it. So those who are going to keep the Sabbath will go into the physical and into the spiritual temple. And blessed are those who take hold of it and do what is right. Keep their hands on the evil.
Yeah, twofold. You're able to keep the Sabbath, go into the physical temple, and those who keep the faith to go into the spiritual temple. Said it wasn't easy. But I see that too. Yeah, it's there. So salvation to come, we know it's the church. We know it's the salvation, the sacrifice of Christ, the blood of Christ. It's got to be, that's the only, your physical salvation would be Cyrus coming out of captivity, which is to come still, but I don't think, like I said, this verse 1, it's talking about Christ. And that's the righteousness to be revealed. It says about to come. You've still got 600 years before that happens. Does it still qualify as about to come? Is it near? I mean, 600 years is 600 years. Yeah, in God's time, 600 years, it's not bad. It's a blank. Yeah, it's like I got hung up on that word and chased it way too far and didn't find an answer. So anyways, but it's got to be the fact that that's 600 years. You know, the kingdom of Christ is at hand. We're in the kingdom of Christ in the church, but the end of times are at hand too. And we've been hearing that for 2,000 years. So it's time. There's nothing, and I know I've seen that, I understand that to be, there's nothing else to come before that. There's nothing else God has prophesied that'll happen before Christ comes. There's not like another covenant. There's not another Messiah. That's it. That's what's next. And even at this time, things start rolling, and then it goes to where it goes. Who can keep from profaning the Sabbath and his hands from doing any evil? I like that. Chuck says that's Christ. Christ keeps the Sabbath. He doesn't do evil. How well can people do on their own? You can't do the second part of that. You can not profane the Sabbath. The Sabbath pretty easy, but it's hard to do the other part.
The amount of times the Jews accused him of profaning the Sabbath.
Yeah.
A bunch of times.
Yeah, they catch him on that, and they're working hard as lawyers on the Sabbath to catch him profaning the Sabbath. That's a catch too. I mean, that's what they're doing. They're lawyering on that day. So I'm with you. It's got to be Christ, but keep the Sabbath is also representative. Keep all the obligations of the law of Moses. It's not just that one thing. It's kind of the grammatical term, and I put the pronunciation because I don't know this word at all. Synecdoche. Anybody ever heard this word? Susan has. Okay. If I could guess anyway, it'd be Susan. So synecdoche. It's a figure of speech in which a part represents the whole thing. So when they say keep the Sabbath, it means keep the law of Moses. So is really what that means by saying that. Can you think of other examples that we use, especially in the church? What are some examples we use this same kind of grammar with, where we only say one thing, but you mean the whole thing? Baptism is a good one. When we talk about baptism, it includes hearing the gospel, believing the gospel, repenting of our sins, confessing that Jesus is Lord. It covers all that. Do you need to say all that each time? You don't, but that's one of those things. Another one is the breaking of the bread. You see in the New Testament when they worship, they'll say breaking of the bread. That's not the only thing they did. That's one marker. It all centers around remembering the sacrifice of Christ. So that's the one thing they pull out. So that's just a figure of speech. Go ahead. That's Schenectady, yes. Synecdoche. And in New York City, New York State, they may have a city like that. You never can tell. There's some weird towns out there, especially in the South. South's got a bunch of weird towns. Moving on to verse 3. Let not the foreigner who has joined himself to the Lord say, the Lord will surely separate me from his people, nor let the eunuch say, behold, I am a dry tree. For thus says the Lord, to the eunuchs who keep my Sabbaths and choose what pleases me, and hold fast my covenant, to them I will give in my house and within my walls a memorial, and a name better than that of sons and daughters. I will give them an everlasting name which will not be cut off. So why this special reference to foreigners and eunuchs? Why take time and address them? Yeah, definitely. Daniel was an example of that. As that'll happen, it happens with the captivity, and in the first wave, the Babylonians took the strongest and the best, and they made eunuchs out of them. So they couldn't start their own kingdoms. But they use their brains and whatever they're good at. Yeah. Daniel would have been one of the eunuchs that this is prophesying and talks about. It'll definitely be the eunuch from Ethiopia. I got a slide on there. No, not that one. There. Huh? You did.
Belief in God and continued, passed on that faith. That was the continuance. Didn't have children to pass it on, but his example made it carry through.
Yeah, you're right. Passed on that faith to the people. Nebuchadnezzar picks it up. That carries on and is an example. Deuteronomy 23, verses 1 and 2. In that, it says, "No one who is emasculated," comes eunuch, "or has his male organ cut off shall enter the assembly of the Lord. No one of illegitimate birth shall enter the assembly of the Lord. None of his descendants, even to the 10th generation, shall enter the assembly of the Lord." What place did foreigners and eunuchs have in the assembly of God? What's that? In the Old Testament, yeah. There's no place. And that's what Deuteronomy 23 says. There's no place for eunuchs. There's no place for foreigners. When we back up and look at this verse, it talks about the foreigner who has joined himself to the Lord. So gone through the proselyte process, for instance. The eunuchs who, although this talks about the eunuchs being cut off from the assembly, the verse here in Isaiah says that if they keep the Sabbaths, if they hold fast to the covenant, they're going to have a spot. They're part of it. Chuck? Yeah? They could be the other sheep. You're definitely right on that. The foreigners in general, if you look at this as coming out of exile, there were Jews that came from the dispersion. There were foreigners who followed and became part of that. And of course, the eunuchs, I don't know. I mean, I would say they're part of that too. If
We know them as Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, but when did they die?
yeah, who knows when they died?
How long? I don't think they came back.
Probably not, but they probably weren't the last of it either.
Yeah.
If they needed a good Israelite, they'd take a good Israelite. So they're not the last, but yeah, I think the special reference where Deuteronomy they would have been not part of the assembly. The special reference gives them hope.
Christ, like when God went to Peter, he put down all these things you could eat now that he wasn't allowed to eat. He said, "Eat? No, I'm not going to do that, Lord." It's like, okay. After 3 times, I think he got the message for Cornelius. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it sets up that hope for, like you say, 600 years later. 600 years plus. It's not going to be the hope as they come out of exile. It's the hope that comes 600 years later. It talks about giving them a better name. Well, who does Isaiah refer to as God's sons and daughters? Why would God give a foreigner a name better than them? And what's that everlasting name? And I think you pretty much know that. That everlasting name is Christian. Put the name of Christ on someone. Who are the sons and daughters of God that's prophesied here? Give them a name better than that of sons and daughters. That would have been the bloodline. What's that? We're all saints, yeah. But the name being better than those who have the bloodline. The spiritual name is better than the bloodline name. And we see that as the bloodline falls away. There's the kingdom of Christ is the church, and that's where the better name is. That's where the salvation is. That's where the righteousness is. Acts 8, we talk about the Ethiopian eunuch. So Philip gets up and goes, and there was an Ethiopian eunuch, a court official of Candace, queen of the Ethiopians, who was in charge of all her treasure. He had to come to Jerusalem to worship, and he was returning and sitting at his chariot, and he was reading the prophet Isaiah. The hope that we saw back there in a couple verses ago is probably what leads him to read Isaiah as he goes along. You know, he's reading Isaiah 53 is where he's at, but that's probably a special hope for him in particular. It'd never really be accepted, and possibly never even be accepted by God, is even how that goes. But he's reading that with that hope from this chapter. I'm going to back up. I kind of got this out of place. No, I'll go back to that. Sorry. You get so much junk, you don't even know where to put it sometimes, you know? So, all right. Moving on to verse 6. Also the foreigners who join themselves to the Lord to minister to him and love the name of the Lord, to be his servants, every one who keeps from profaning the Sabbath and holds fast my covenant, even those I will bring to my holy mountain and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices for all the peoples, the Lord God who gathers the dispersed of Israel declares, yet others I will gather to him, to those already gathered. So what's the holy mountain that God brings his faithful to? I got it underlined in verse 7. What's the holy mountain that God brings his faithful to? Mountains are typically symbolic of kings. So his holy mountain would be the church. This is the church. So you see things that look like the temple, but they also at the same time not. Was the temple ever a house of prayer for all peoples? In verse 7 it talks about, I'll make them joyful in my house of prayer, and their burnt offerings and their sacrifices will be acceptable on my altar. For my house will be called a house of prayer for all peoples. Was the temple ever a house of prayer for all peoples? No. Yeah, the physical temple. Spiritual temple is a whole lot. Yeah, the spiritual temple is. But the physical temple was not. It wasn't that way. And that's the difference here. To be accurate, it would have to be the spiritual temple. It would have to be the church and not the temple, because it wasn't a house of prayer for all people. This is where I got this map. And of course, you can't probably read everything on the map. This is the best one I found. Some of the ones are terrible out there. I really like the pink and orange one, but I didn't put it up there. The temple is the big block in the top center. It's got the Holy of Holies and top inside of that. It's got the holy place just lower than that. Got a bunch of other stuff that we don't even need to worry about. But on the bottom part of this rectangle, there's a chamber of, I don't know what that is. I know there's a chamber of Nazarites, there's a chamber of lepers, a chamber of wood. Is that right? Chamber of oils and wines. Anyways, and beyond that, outside the dark black lines is the court of the Gentiles. Who could go into the temple? Who could actually go in and pray directly to God? The Levite, the high priest, right? He's like the only guy that can go in there, once a year? Once a year. In the Holy of Holies. And the other part there, the holy place, that would be more Levite priests. They could go there, I guess, daily with the offering of sacrifices and stuff like that. That was part of it. But the standard common bloodline Jew, where could he go? Male Jew, because then there's, where could she go? The dark black bottom, the bottom part down there, that's the court of women right there. And I didn't pull it, but I know there's one point where the Sanhedrin is kind of gathering in that area, And they overhear, or I guess when Jesus comes to the temple, but they're just kind of hanging out there, and they see him and follow him.
Those little
Gates.
little storage places. They stored the contribution in. And I don't know where the tables were set up. I think they were outside the dark black line of the wall.
The tables, that would probably make sense. The tables were outside of the black line, dark black line, outside of the gates. It could be, I don't know. I'd almost, that one chamber of oils and wines in the court of women, there's a chamber of wood. It might be in that area. I don't know. I'm going to just say that, I guess, and I won't even try to go any farther than that. But yeah, when Jesus comes and he overturns the tables, it's somewhere. It's definitely not in the holy place or in the holiest of holies. It's in a place where there are more people, but not, the standard people can't get into all the way. Where would the Gentiles go? Where would the people who don't know God? And I'm going to say that the foreigners who become proselytes, probably the same kind of thing, the eunuchs, because they don't have the rights. And I don't even know why some of them, I don't even know why they'd go to the temple, but there's a court of the Gentiles. There's an area for people like that. There's an area where they want to be close to God. There's an area where they may see the stuff going on, but they're definitely excluded from the inside. You see a lot more what? Commoners? Yeah, I would say so. The people who are sick or unclean in some form or fashion, they'd be in the court of the Gentiles. There's a spot for them, but it's not the spot. So it's really, the temple itself, the physical temple, was never a house for all the peoples. It was never a house of prayer for all the peoples. It might have been where that kind of thing happened, but they were outside at best. And we talked about Jesus coming and flipping tables and stuff. He calls it a house of, Jesus definitely doesn't call it a house of prayer. Matthew 21:13, and Jesus entered the temple, drove out all those who were selling and buying in the temple, and overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who were selling doves. And he said to them, "It is written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you were making a robber's den." So that's what it had become. It was definitely not a house of prayer at that time. So. As this describes the church, and we see the spiritual part, my holy mountain is the church, place where foreigners are welcome, place where eunuchs become part of it. People are joyful in the house of prayer. It is a house of prayer for all people. But you also see about profaning the Sabbath and burnt offerings and sacrifices. Are those part of the church or not part of the church? You got some temple stuff, physical temple stuff mixed in with spiritual temple stuff. Yeah, well, you're right. Christ is a physical sacrifice, it's spiritual. The ultimate sacrifice. The Sabbath and the burnt offerings and the sacrifices that it talks about here can't be physical. There's other places like that. Christ is the ultimate sacrifice. He's the perfect sacrifice. There'd be no reason to bring goats and cows and grain and wine to sacrifice to God after the perfect sacrifice happened. And after the law is nailed to the cross too. Profaning the Sabbath, that disappears. And I guess a lot of some commentaries, especially as they look at this, they look at it as keeping the Sabbath beyond that. But that doesn't, it dies off. You don't see the Sabbath in the New Testament, other than chasing Jesus down for breaking the Sabbath. Verse 9, all you beasts of the field, all you beasts in the forest, come to eat. His watchmen are blind, all of them know nothing, all of them are mute dogs, unable to bark, dreamers, lying down, who love to slumber. We looked at these verses earlier, but we'll just kind of finish off with them. Blind watchmen, the mute dogs, dreamers who love to slumber are the leaders of the Israelites, or Judahites, or whatever they call it at this point. In verse 11, and the dogs are greedy, strong of soul and appetite. They are not satisfied. They don't have satisfaction. And they are shepherds who have no understanding. They have all turned to their own way, each one to his own just gain, to the last one. Come, they say, let us get wine, let us drink heavily of strong drink, and tomorrow we will be like today, only more so. The traits of dogs that we see with the dreamers and the watchmen, the leaders there, that the greediness, that strong appetite, they're never satisfied. Do you ever have a dog that would just eat? I had a dog that would just eat. If it was there, he'd eat. They just eat it again. It looked like food, they're going to eat it. So, I don't guess not all dogs that way, but a couple of dogs we've had that way. Yeah. The shepherds have who are the shepherds have no understanding, turn their own way, seeking unjust gain, and that's the leadership of Israel. Chuck included these two verses in John 3:13 through 18. The Passover of the Jews was near, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. He found in the temple those who were selling oxen and sheep and doves, and the money changers seated at their tables. He made a scourge of cords and drove them all out of the temple, and the sheep and the oxen. He poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned the tables. And those who were selling the doves, he said, take these things away. Stop making my Father's house a place of business. His disciples remembered what was written, the zeal for your house will consume me. The Jews then said to him, what sign do you show us as your authority for doing these things? And we talked about that one a little bit ago, but the Father's house is a house of prayer, not a house of business. Matthew 23:16 through 18, woe to you blind guides, which we just saw right there, verse 10. Yeah, verse 10. Who say, whoever swears by the temple, that is nothing, but whoever swears by the gold of the temple is obligated. You fools and blind men. Which is more important, the gold or the temple that sanctified the gold? And whoever swears by the altar, that is nothing, but whoever swears by the offering on it, he is obligated. You blind men, which is more important, the offering or the altar that sanctifies the offering? And that was some of the attitude of the leaders. The offering was really the key to it all. That's where they made their money. I'm going to try to summarize this basically up. Chapter set in the last days of the Jewish monarchy is set up in the last days before they go into exile. The temple's still standing. The leaders are self-indulgent. Wickedness reigned among God's people. That's really what you saw. Part of it is I see God admonishing the Israelites to remember and obey His law, to stay faithful. That's what we'll get through as the remnant. That's what sets up the church. But also you see the church in there. This promise of salvation, the promise of righteousness through Christ, and the church is what we really see in this. Now, road to salvation begins with the captivity. He has to get rid of all the problems there. He begins with that captivity, goes through the remnant, and that brings Christ into time. So that's what we have right now. Chuck's going to pick up in chapter 57 next week. And I know that talks a lot about foreigners and just Gentiles. Promise of the Gentiles is really what it gets into, which is a big deal for at the time when they were not a part of the assembly at all. All right, we're good? Thank you.